Alright, so having gone through the definition and some basic ideas about the discrete time Fourier transform, we now move on to formally studying the properties of the discrete time Fourier transform. So for your quick recall, I have written the basic equations involving the DTFT and its inverse on the top right of the page, and now we can quickly go through the properties that we need to study. Now many of these properties are very similar to the kind of properties we have studied for other Fourier transformations before, so I am only going to state those properties but spend my time primarily on highlighting those properties that are different about the DTFT as opposed to the previously studied Fourier transformations. Alright, so the first of these properties is what is called linearity. So this is a very familiar property to us. So the idea of linearity is that if I have one signal whose DTFT is given by, let's say the signal is small x and the DTFT is denoted by capital X, and similarly I have another signal y whose DTFT is denoted by capital Y, then the linearity property tells you that if you take any linear combination of the signals x and y, the spectrum of this linear combination is just going to be the same linear combination of the original spectra. So alpha times capital X of omega plus beta times capital Y of omega. Right? In other words, if you think of the DTFT computation itself as a system where the input to the system is the time domain representation, the output is the frequency domain representation, then that system is linear in the sense of linearity of systems that we have talked about before. Alright, so that is my first property on linearity. All of the Fourier transformations we have studied so far satisfy this property. The second property I want to talk about is on time and frequency shifts. Okay, so this property says that again we start off by consider any signal x whose DTFT is given by capital X. The first time shift property talks about what happens to the spectrum if I shift my signal in time. Right? If I shift my signal in time, as you should expect, the spectrum basically gets multiplied by a phasor, e raised to minus j omega n naught. This is something that we have talked about even before, namely that shifting a signal in time results in a multiplication of the spectrum by a phasor, right? Multiplication by a phasor in the frequency domain. Okay, so this is again very easy to verify from the formulas for DTFT and inverse DTFT. So I won't get into the proof, I leave that for you to verify. Right? The next is the dual version of this property, namely that I multiply by a phasor in time. So I multiply by e raised to, let's say, j omega naught n. Remember, this is a phasor in time. So n is the time index. Omega naught is some constant, which is the frequency associated with the phasor, right? Times xn. So I multiply with a phasor in time and I ask what happens to the spectrum. Again, as you should expect, a dual thing happens, namely that the spectrum gets shifted. Okay, so these two properties are familiar to us, namely that multiplication with a phasor in one domain results in a translation in the other domain, right? So in time, if you shift in time, you multiply by a phasor in frequency. If you shift in frequency, that corresponds to multiplication by a phasor in time, right? So these are properties that are familiar to us, but there is one very interesting takeaway that comes from this latter property when I specialize this to the case of omega naught equals pi. Okay, for the case where omega naught equals pi, what this property tells you is that e raised to j pi n times xn, which is of course exactly the same as minus 1 raised to n xn, this thing has a spectrum which is capital X of omega minus pi. Okay, so this is actually a fairly remarkable property, and we have not seen an analog of this so far, certainly in continuous time. Namely that if you take a discrete time signal and multiply it by minus 1 raised to n, its spectrum gets shifted exactly by pi. Now what is special about pi? Remember, when it comes to the spectrum, I have already told you that the behavior around omega equals 0 should be thought of as the low frequency behavior of the signal, whereas the behavior around plus minus pi should be thought of as the high frequency behavior of the signal, right? Uh, so what this tells you is that if you take any signal and multiply it by minus 1 raised to n, then effectively the low frequency components of the original signal become the high frequency components of the new signal, and vice versa, right? And so there is this remarkable transformation of low frequency behavior into high frequency behavior and vice versa that happens in discrete time when you multiply by minus 1 raised to n. Okay, so let me illustrate this. So this is, I'm still jumping ahead a little bit because I haven't talked about the connection with filters before, but this is something that we have seen in other contexts, so I think you might be able to appreciate this now. So let's consider an ideal low pass filter in discrete time, right? And I remember, when it comes to the spectrum, I'm only going to worry about the behavior from minus pi to pi. An ideal low pass filter would have a spectrum of this form. I write LP for low pass, omega, and this omega c is my cutoff frequency. So I hope everybody can appreciate that this is in fact what the spectrum of an ideal low pass filter in discrete time would look like. Right? Now if you believe this, then it's also easy to see what the spectrum is associated with an ideal high pass filter. Right? So an ideal high pass filter, remember the high frequency components are sitting in the neighborhood of minus pi to pi. So a high pass filter would have a spectrum like this. Right? Where again you will have some cutoff frequency. You can think of this as pi minus omega c. This is pi plus omega c. Okay? So it basically retains high frequency components of a width on either side of omega c at minus pi, and so on, right? So this, now the thing to note between these two is these two spectra are simply shifted versions of one another by exactly pi. So the thing to note about these two is that if you look at the spectrum associated with the high pass filter, that is simply the spectrum associated with the low pass filter shifted by pi. Alright, and an immediate implication of this, using the previous property that I have outlined here, is that if you look at the impulse response of the ideal high pass filter, that is simply going to be minus 1 raised to n times the impulse response of the ideal low pass filter. Okay, so that's the remarkable property I wanted to highlight. This is true in discrete time, namely that when you multiply a time domain signal with minus 1 raised to n, then the high frequency components get translated to the low frequencies and the low frequency components move to the higher frequencies. In other words, the spectrum shifts by pi. And what that means is that since the ideal low pass filter and ideal high pass filter have spectra which are just pi shifted versions of one another, the impulse response of the high pass filter is just minus 1 raised to n times the impulse response of the ideal low pass filter. Okay, and this is, of course, I have said this in the context of ideal high pass and low pass filters. The more generally, this can be used to basically compare high pass and low pass filters in general. Right? So in discrete time, there is a very close connection between high pass filters and low pass filters, and we will explore this further going forward. So if this is not clear to you yet, don't worry, we will come back to this later. At this point, what I need you to appreciate is this main property, namely that if you multiply by a phasor in time, you end up having a frequency shift, and if I specialize this shift to pi, the property that I get is the following. Namely that if I multiply any signal in time by minus 1 raised to n, its spectrum gets shifted by pi, and so therefore its low frequency components, because of the multiplication by minus 1 raised to n, get moved to the higher frequency ranges, and the high frequency components get moved to the lower frequency ranges. So long as you can understand this bit, we are good. Alright, so that was the second property. Now let's move on to the next one. So property number 3 that I want to talk about is time reversal. This is a property that we are very familiar with, we have seen it before, namely that if I have a signal x with DTFT capital X, then if you reverse the signal in time, the spectrum also gets reversed. Okay, so time reversal results in a frequency reversal as well. Okay, this is again a very trivial property to verify from the equations governing the DTFT itself. So I won't get into how to do that, and move on now to property number 4. Right, so property number 4 concerns conjugation. This is also something that's actually very familiar to us. What this property tells you is that if X has spectrum capital X, then if you take the complex conjugate of the signal X, the spectrum becomes X star minus omega. Okay, and what are some of the immediate, again it's easy to prove this property from the governing equations of the DTFT. What I'll focus here are the implications of this property. The first implication is what happens if X is real. So if I have a real signal, that means that X is the same as X star, right? If X is the same as X star, then capital X of omega would be the same as capital X star of minus omega. So what that means is that the spectrum capital X is conjugate symmetric. Right? Specifically, X of omega is X star minus omega. So this property is what we refer to as conjugate symmetry. Right? The second to note is, what if X is real valued and let's say even. Okay, if X is real valued and even, then combining the conjugation property with the time reversal property, you should be able to convince yourself that the spectrum will also become real and even. Okay, this is again very similar to properties we have studied before, so I won't get into exactly how the justification is. I will leave that for you to figure out. And finally, if X is real valued and odd, in that case you will end up seeing that X, the spectrum, is both odd and purely imaginary. Right, and in particular these two follow by combining the conjugation property that we have written here with the time reversal property that we have written here. Okay, so that's the conjugation property in the yeah. So next, let's move on to the next property after this.